Dear friends and academicians, I am very happy for the opportunity to meet you. As a lecturer of the Adana Cukorova University Faculty of Education, German Language Department from Turkey, my special research area is the contemporary literature, which mainly includes interculturalism, intermedialism, and intertextualism. I believe that the ideas, wishes, feelings, and psychological state of many authors from different cultures reflect their inner worlds as well as their culture. In this presentation, we will deal with Gothic elements as they appear in the works of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Ernst Theodor Amadeus Hoffmann, and Edgar Allan Poe in the concept of the horrific, dreadful image of the evil and the uncanny in human existence in the circle of hermeneutical interpretation. In this study, we will question who did influence the authors and how and where did they quoted the themes themselves, as well as how did they give such strong and deep literature works. In a way, the silent scream of the authors to each other, the readers, and to themselves will become loud and clear in the context. We will also point out that how did they reflect their own traumas within their works, as well as even how did the doppelganger is materialized in their works with the power of comparative literature within the framework of sociological and psychological literature. We often discuss prejudices, stereotypes, images, and motives about the foreign and domestic works, especially through literature texts. We are analyzing this on the basis of cultural differences and the similarities with our students by discussing in a didactic way. In our study, we will ask the question of why these authors were so popular in their century, which sociological and psychological reasons have persuaded them to produce these works, what is the uncanny part and what made their works uncanny. Also, according to the work of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, we will seek the answer of whether the man is the servant of God or the Satan is the servant of man. So we will focus on the 19th century of Europe and America. For us, it's a picture of thinkers and writers who were the leaders after the Enlightenment epoch and the classic anti-romantic epoch, especially in the area of political discussions transferred to the literature works as in psychology, philosophy, and Gothic fiction. Gothic became a synonym for dark, grotesque, sublime, supernatural, and uncanny that evoked the feelings of terror on terror within the reader. The first usage of the term Gothic was in Horace Walpole's novel The Castle of Otranto. According to Eva, Gothic literature is the prevailing motifs of supernatural and uncanny figures, types of demonic entities, Satan, vampires, zombies, doppelgangers, and ghosts incorporated in everyday life. The prime source of fear and terror is the acknowledged that strange and demonic events can occur everywhere and to everyone without any obvious reason or warning. Sometimes the Gothic authors put an emphasis on love in an uncanny form too. Actually, on the other hand, in literature and in people's minds, the image of evil and Satan did not appear in 18th century for the first time. Since the creation myth, Satan has been used in this way in both literary texts and art, especially in intercultural words as the other, enemy, evil, and punisher. As one of the strongest examples of this, especially because they were worried about the expansionist policies of Suleiman the Magnificent, Ottoman Turks were depicted as the others or plain evil in German culture. According to Luther, the Turks are the punishment stick of the god. In our intercultural and inter-artistic image impressions, not only some of the Germans but also some of the Italians depicted the Turks as the Antichrist as Tiziano in same period. With the Enlightenment phase and the development of philosophy in the 18th century, especially in European literature, and with the influence of Napoleon in the 19th century, philosophical and psychological concepts, images, and motives began to further theorize the Turks, for example, whom they considered foreigners in their culture and self. It is in our work that within the framework of Gothic literature, our writers have made Satan the focal point in their works. Our first point of departure will be Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. According to Weiner, Goethe comes from a wealthy family, which is the son of Johann Caspar Goethe, who happens to be the king's advisor. Goethe's mother, Katharina Elisabeth, was a woman who was always cheerful and who made her love to read, who instilled Orientalism in her 1001 Night States. That is why we consider the concept of Weltliteratur to be among those that best represent it. Goethe is platonically in love with his friend's wife, Marianne Willemer. For this reason, he shares his writings with her. In his work, Faust, especially in the prologue in Heaven, there is a bet between the devil and the god. According to their bet with God, as Mephistopheles wants the first soul and bickers with God on whether he can taint the rest of the humanity. God tests Faust by allowing Mephistopheles lead him down and said, mankind is in the wrong as long as it strives. Es irrt der Mensch, solange strebt. So, Faust may learn from these misdeeds. For a while, the Lord grants him to Mephisto to be sarcastic about it, but then he compels him to follow the Lord's reasoning. Once again, Mephistopheles repeats his verdict. I pity people in their days of misery. Then God, tired of Mephistopheles' talk and its generalities, interrupts him with a brief question. Do you know Faust? Mephistopheles' brief counter-question. The doctor? Mephistopheles laughs carefully and contemptuously, to which the master again only responds with a short, decisive word. My servant. With this one word about the servant of God, the Lord puts the consideration in Mephistopheles' mind. Goethe was inspired by Morley's Dr. Faustus in his Faust that published in 1604. This play was about a man who sold his soul to the devil for power and knowledge. Goethe's Faust is a wise man. He questions his own existence in the dark study room. However, Mephistopheles, on the other hand, in accordance with their bet with the god, appears in the image of a black dog first of all, pushing him to worldly pleasures while causing the girl named Gretchen to suffer. He says, I am a fact of darkness. Thus, Mephistopheles wanted to show him pain and pleasure and told him that I am your servant. Therefore, Faust sells his soul to Satan and their adventure begins. In the process, he drinks the magic drink, rejuvenates and obsessed with Gretchen. Later, Gretchen gives birth to Faust's son, but then she strangles her baby with her own hands, and then she gets imprisoned. Regardless, Faust wanted to save her. Mephistopheles would tell him that she will be hanged the next day and said, you'll see each other in hell later. According to Eva, as in German literature, the American literature also exhibits Gothic features. On the other hand, the Romantic period in American literature lasted from 1830 to 1865, which probably the most famous one is Edgar Allan Poe. And his literary opus can be defined as a combination of Gothic elements coupled with the usage of logic, poor imagination, and, of course, horrors. In Charles Dickens' novel Born and Death, Dickens made The Crow speak, which Poe influenced from his work and reflected it in his poem Raven, which this poem has a strong onomatopoeic side. Poe's father leaves the house when he is 2.5 years old and Poe is adopted. He has a deep love for his stepmother Frances Allan. In 1836, he married his cousin Virginia, but Virginia died of tuberculosis. And according to most of the comments, the lover is looking for in the pessimist poem Raven, with Lenore is Virginia. The protagonist, the priestly, falling asleep in a library, hears a voice, startled, and opens the door. There is no one. Then he opens the window and Raven enters. It talks to him and says one thing, nevermore. However, in the first part of the poem, he says, this I whispered and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. We want to give specific verses without an order. Bird or beast opened the sculptured bust above his chamber door, which such name as nevermore. Prophet, said I, think of evil. Prophet still, if bird or devil. On this home by horror haunted, tell me truly I implore, it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, 'cause the raven nevermore. Here, just like Goethe, a gloomy room, shadows instead of a doctor bird, reflects the devil. He wants his lover back and brings madness, terror, horror, sudden acts reflect the Gothic literary writing style of the period and the mood of the person. Doppelganger is, in my opinion, a crow, but Poe cannot free himself from the circle of melancholy and demonic emotions in adversity. And here again, we can stress that the quote is Faust applies. Mankind is in the wrong as long as it strives. He beats himself for something he can never have. In the circle of contemporary literature, our third work is Devil's Elixirs. The basic idea of the story came from Matthew Gregory Lewis Newell the Monk, 1796. Born in 1776, Edgar Hoffmann's parents separated and he was raised by his uncle. However, his own daughter has died and he was in a psychological breakdown. He constantly drank and lived in poor conditions as Edgar Allan Poe himself. In the work, the monk named Medardus opens the bottle and drinks the devil's elixir, which he should not drink, and as in Faust and Raven, he gets caught up in his own demonic feelings instead of the image of animals representing the devil. He tries to kill his lover, but instead he has the character of a doppelganger, and he does most of the evil for him, and he ensures that his existence does not end. From the very beginning, it is reported that the protagonist's father was deceived by the devil and let down, which while Medardus' father was crusading, Medardus born, but the father dies there. And this actually expresses Hoffmann's longing to his own father in real life. If we compare the author's suffering such as fatherlessness, just like Poe, and parental strictness, just like Goethe, or losing loved ones, or even never being able to be with them, we can say that they have their own emotional quakes. And so they reflect it in their Gothic style, which gives the evil of the Satan. When we look at the life story of the authors in the works, Karaca Küçük draws our attention in her paper to the Freudian article Uncanny. Freud states the uncanny as the interval and repetition of a familiar or repressed situation. So both the raven and the devil's elixirs are the reflections of the silent scream of the suppressed, fears and denies both audibly and visually. According to my interpretation, the reason why Faust gets Gretchen killed is that maybe Goethe couldn't get over Marianne Willemer. We mentioned also about melancholic denying of the reality of the end of the existence and their own loss. In this context, the doppelganger is also a reflection in all works of the other in the self. In the circle of contemporary literature, I will also give an example from Elif Shafak, who, among the most successful authors in my country, virtually also lived in Boston too, and emotionally affected me with one of her works, The Father and the Bastard. Elif Shafak heals Turkish society in this context. In the work, the fact that the protagonist was once raped by his brother and gives birth to his brother's child terrifies the reader as an incest form of uncanny and deep trauma where the devil was in her own. Yes, in the end, at least, I will send a salam from the Orient to Occident, like Goethe, who once said, Occident und Orient sind nicht mehr zu trennen. With that being said, I have showcased that how similar and how aligning the people's feelings and how we are the same to the point that we cannot be separated as right, left, east, west, or in any other way as it is in the Orient und Occident of Goethe in actuality and in the meaning of Weltliteratur. Thank you very much for joining me. If you have any further questions, you can write me anytime.